Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Future in Review podcast. My name is Berit Anderson. I am the host, and I am also the Chief Operating Officer of Future in Review and the Strategic News Service, our weekly global report focused on the future of technology and the global economy. And I'm here today with a new friend of mine, Richard Socher, who Richard and I met at Fortune Brainstorm this year in Aspen. And Richard is the CEO of You.com, which is a competitor to Google. So we're going to talk a little bit more today about why anyone would take on that Herculean task, how things got started and what it means and how it feels and like what the strategic considerations are to try to build a competitor to a company that has essentially a monopoly on search. So Richard, thank you so much for being with me and us here today. It's really great to see you again.
Thanks for having me.
So I'm curious if you could tell me, I think your previous role before doing this, were you the chief scientist at Salesforce?
Right. Mm-hmm.
And what about that experience led you to think I should build a Google competitor?
I actually had the idea about 8 years ago or so at the end of my PhD.
Oh, really?
And I just couldn't quite shake it off, but it's such an audacious task. And I was an academic for 10 years. It felt too audacious to really go after it right away. 10 years ago, also, no one was really complaining yet about Google and its privacy violation and the engagement loops that it would suck you in. And the fact that there was just so many ads, all of these problems have gotten worse and worse over the last couple of years with Google. And so more and more people are now noticing it and also worrying about their privacy, their time, and having some kind of agency and control over their information diet.
I'm curious, I'm sure you see a lot more about this than the average person. What do you think are the most egregious examples of privacy theft for someone who maybe is not quite up to date on what Google is doing behind the scenes and is kind of just, happily using their Gmail and Google Docs setup? Like, what to you are things that would make you as a consumer say, this is not okay?
So there's sort of very high level things with the whole economy that struggles and is less efficient because of Google. And then there's sort of user specific things. Users specifically often complain about the fact that they search for something once and then it follows them around the internet forever. Mm-hmm. They decided not to buy it, or they did already buy it, and then it still follows them around, and it's just kind of an annoying experience. So that happens more and more. And then, of course, the fact that you can be hyper-targeted and it can almost undermine democracy in some insidious ways are not ideal. And then people also are shocked when they learn that Google isn't just following them around when they're on Google and on YouTube, but it's almost everywhere else on the web too, where they have tracking pixels that follow you around. And so even on some very personal private pages that people usually try to go into incognito mode for, Google is still actually tracking them and identifying what kinds of preferences do they have, what kinds of medical issues do they have, and then sell that to the highest bidding advertiser whenever they make a query later on.
Interesting. Okay. And when did you found You, and how long has it been around? What's that evolution been like?
Yeah, we started in 2020, at the end of 2020, and we launched in November last year. So just been around for a little more than like 9-10 months.
Wow. And did it take you a long time to build?
It took almost a year, as we're ramping up the team to get, and of course we launched like a few months into it in a private beta and got some initial feedback, and then thought we're good enough in November last year. But it's kind of one of those tasks similar to, I actually love this quote from Mark Hawkins: better, never done. Mark Hawkins, the former CFO at Salesforce.
Better, never done. I like that.
Better, never done. Like you can, and search is so true for search, right? That you always do better in various ways. Even, companies like Google that have been at it for 20 years that have unlimited resources are still not doing that well on so many searches. And I'd love to maybe show you one emblematic example of that. Is that okay right now?
Yeah, go for it.
Nice. I'll just show you kind of an example. If you're a developer, for instance, a programmer, and you want to compute, have a direct computation for a Fibonacci function, kind of a famous function, Google will show you a bunch of lists of blue links. Maybe you can look at people also ask, and kind of get more blue links, and that's it. And that's just not really helping you program that answer. And then if you look on u.com, you have a Stack Overflow app, and you see a piece of code, and you have a copy and paste button, and then boom, you're done, right? And if that wasn't exactly the way you want to do it, you can see more along that dimension, or you can go into a different, very popular site, Geeks for Geeks. You can read up more details on a Medium blog post. You can see all the videos. You can see GitHub issues and sort of open source tools that implemented this. You can see research papers about it. And if those research papers have open source implementations, you find those directly connected to it. And you just compare that, and you're like, well, obviously u.com is better. Like, it's such a better experience for developers. And it's just one of the many use cases that we really dug in, looked at what's the job to be done here. You want to code something, you want to get something done. You don't want to spend time like watching a ton of videos. Sometimes you do, sometimes often you don't.
You really just want the basic instructions right away. Yeah. And I think it's you guys are clearly going after the developer aspect of the market as an inroad to a broader search, which is really smart, because developers, as we all know, are early adopters, right? They're always trying new tools, or they're like learning new things. They're eager to like, and it seems to me that the other thing that sets you apart from its competitors is that, looking through the search results that you just showed me, it's clear that you have weighted the results according to what sites are most useful or most popular, instead of, when you compare that side by side with Google, it's like, what are the other Google properties, right? So you're seeing results from Medium, you're seeing highlighted as like a major kind of like forum for discussion or thought leadership on the internet. You're seeing GitHub, you're seeing Stack Overflow, and that could seem rather basic, but it's actually pretty revolutionary in the world of search.
And it goes even further in that you actually have control over those kinds of apps. So if you go to u.com/apps, you can actually not install, right? Because unlike on your phone, you don't need to actually install a search app, but the equivalent of installing is preferring, and then the AI will know if it's relevant.
Oh, so you actually have control over your personal algorithm, is what you're saying.
Exactly.
You can you have become the trainer for your personal search algorithm.
Exactly. And you can say, I want to see more Twitter and more Reddit, or I don't want to see W3 School, which some people really dislike, but then it is coming up in search results all over. But here you can just say, I don't want to see it as often.
Yeah.
Same with news.
Interesting. Very interesting. So you launched, less than a year ago publicly. What has the uptake been like so far?
It's been surprisingly well. It's been going really well. It's been several years ahead of where DuckDuckGo was when they launched. We have already hundreds of thousands of users, and it's growing every
hundreds
week.
of thousands of users focused. And are those people primarily developers? Like, what is the breakdown of people you're seeing open to trying these new?
So we don't have a perfect breakdown because we believe in privacy. So we don't
true.
super well. But we get some sense in aggregation, and it is our largest group of users, our developers. And those are also folks that they use search 30 to 60 minutes a day to find solutions. There's an interesting survey from Stack Overflow that just came out a few weeks ago. And so compared to the average user who might just be like, I don't know, Ford 150, go to the Ford site, look for the weather, and that's it. And then so maybe the only two searches they make that day, like they might not see as big of a difference yet, and if they don't care and they're about their privacy and their information diet and their time and efficiency, then there's less of a strong sale. But for developers, it really matters to have a good search engine. And
so how do you balance what is your business model? I'm guessing it's still ad-based, or is that incorrect?
The truth is we currently don't have a business model.
Okay.
We're still early on. we're a consumer company. We're just focused on growth. But in the current market and so on, it is more and more top of mind, and we're working on getting private ads set up. There are a bunch of hurdles you have to get through, and privacy reviews and all of that. But we're basically similar to DuckDuckGo, want to do private advertisements in the future. But we also, again, want to give the option to people to turn that off and to say, oh, I don't want to see any advertisements. I'll just rather pay you a little bit of money every month, like $5 or $10 or so, and not see any ads. But the truth is, ads do make it more accessible for people who are international. We also have tons of international users and growth in different countries as influencers kind of put out a YouTube video and say, oh, I love you.com. And all of a sudden we get this big spike in Brazil or Argentina or Germany and India. And so it's been really great to see all of that. But yeah, so it's
have you thought about, I'm sure you have, but have you thought about how you will, I mean, private ads is great, and like I love the option. It seems like you're very much focused on the user, right, and what they want, right? So yes, you can have no ads if you want and pay a little bit of money, or you can have ads and pay and not pay and get it for free. Have you thought about how to balance, particularly as you grow? I'm assuming you're going to continue growing over the next couple of years. Have you thought about some of these questions that Google has been dealing with a lot over the last couple of years? Like, how do you balance the demands of an authoritarian leader in a foreign country who wants you to limit what their citizens are seeing? How do you balance like the growth and the pressure of an IPO potentially with maintaining that commitment to privacy? Like, do you have a plan for those things, I guess is my question.
Yeah, great questions. I guess they're slightly different. So one, on the monetization, while ads are a clever way to sort of monetize a lot of different kinds of searches, our goal is actually to have apps, not ads. And so the applications, they can have their own way to monetize. Maybe they have an affiliate link. Maybe they provide a particularly useful service. So for instance, we're now already with You Eat comparing different food delivery options, and we just let you order the food right there in your search engine results page. Or you want to do some copy editing, you want to have an AI help you write a blog post, you just basically have you write, you.com/write, and it'll just write you a whole blog post. And then you pay for those services rather than the ads that lead you somewhere where you may eventually buy that service. And the App Store is also opening up. So we're actually this week launching our first open platform app, where we didn't actually implement the app, but other companies can participate, in our privacy, security, and speed requirements and guidelines. They can participate on that first page of the search engine's results page. And that, I think, is a reason why a lot of companies would rather see us succeed than continuing to paying this Google tax. There's some crazy stories about Google I could tell you if we have some time, about almost like racketeering mafia-like structures that the sales team sometimes employs there. But to answer your other question, we internally believe very much in trust, facts, and kindness as our three values. And so we will not allow governments to change and bias our search results. We also believe that users should have that control. So you can actually, select thumbs up, thumbs down, the kinds of sources that you prefer. And we're continuing to increase those and asking users for feedback of what kinds of sources they want to see. And then also maybe eventually, once we see kind of folks getting one direction, maybe we'll show them the other side and have kind of, here's a discovery section where you only want kind of news. Maybe it's good to see the other perspective. Oh, maybe it's not as bad or not as good as you think it is. And that's something I found very helpful.
Getting beyond the filter bubble.
Exactly.
Like here's where I've seen some interesting studies on that, like showing people where they fit into the intellectual kind of like universe or political universe, and demonstrating what folks in other parts of the ideological space think and are talking about is actually helpful in reducing political polarity. So that sounds very interesting. So let's talk about the Google part, because this is, I think, the trickiest challenge to building a Google competitor. What have you experienced how has that shaped your role and your journey as a CEO? What challenges have you come up against in that way?
So there are so many. It's kind of rough. I'll just do a couple concrete ones. One is we have a Chrome extension to actually change the behavior of your URL navigation bar, where you would type in, your searches and website addresses. And so it's like it takes some convincing and sort of providing people an amazing experience and everything to get people to say, all right, I'm going to make that switch. I'm going to change my URL bar and default to u.com rather than to Google. Once you do that, it waits for a few seconds and then there's a pop-up. And if you just click OK on the pop-up, then boom, we're actually gone and Google is back to be the default. And then you actually have to read it. We're like, are you sure you want to change your search engine to u.com? Blah. And the default button is sort of blue, and the right one is no, I want to switch back to Google. And the sort of white on white background button in the bottom left is the like, no, I actually want to keep u.com. That's why I just installed this extension. And so that is one of the examples of how Google owns the operating system, the browser, and everything, and use that monopoly power for their own. Then on top of it, we have an Android app where we basically allow you to put a little search box widget on your home screen so you can search directly from your home screen. Well, if you install it and you even turn on the option to get that search box, it's on your second home screen, or on the first home screen, there's still. And then Google pays $15 billion a year to Apple. Apple seems to care a lot about privacy on the right hand, but on the left hand, they get these $15 billion from Google. And so, every year, it's just like, let that sink in, how much money Google extracts from its users to be able to pay $15 billion a year to Apple to be the default. And iPhone users very often don't change the defaults. And so they're there. And not only that, but Apple also somehow doesn't allow you to change your search engine to anything
I have noticed that.
And so we had to build an entire iPhone browser and search app that is now at the bottom of my shortcuts bar here instead of Safari. And it filters out tracking, it filters out ads, and it lets you have u.com as your default search engine. But it's like, you don't have to think that maliciously to say, well, they get $15 billion a year from Google. Why is there not a possibility to change my default search engine and Safari to anything but these like 3-4 options that Apple approves of that are just clearly not as good as Google, and hence like maybe not a threat, and others you can't add. So it is very
well, and as we all know, users will do the easiest thing most of the time, right? And so if you can make it just hard enough, if you can make it just hard enough for them to like try opt into a product, you're going to probably reduce the ability of whether it's you or some other search engine. But I mean, what has the actual impact of that been for you?
I mean, we see it in our statistics, right? There are a bunch of people who click the button to install our Chrome extension, and then we immediately lose 10 to 15, sometimes even 30%, depending on the week, to the people that just clicked OK, and then they installed the extension, but Google immediately deactivated it. So it does hurt directly our bottom line and our top line growth and everything. So it's pretty rough. And then just having to build an entire browser when you're trying to be a search engine company, also kind of rough. Like we didn't want to have to build a browser, but now we've built an Android browser, we built an iPhone browser, and may even have to eventually do it for desktop because there is no other independent browser anymore that lets you make an easy choice there. So that's from the user perspective. But for companies, I've heard several crazy stories, and one of them comes from one of our investors. So it's very close and verified. But if you're a company that actually succeeds in creating a ton of useful content, and you get tons of users on your site through SEO and through Google, then what at some point will happen is the Google sales ads team will reach out to you and say, hey, do you want to buy some ads to get even more traffic? And if you then make the mistake to say, no, we're already getting enough traffic, boom, you're on page 8 all of a sudden.
Right. So
no more traffic.
You're saying there's a punitive reaction if you decline to become a sales customer.
Yeah, so I've heard this story twice now, and you know, of course, Google will say, "Oh well, like we had to change our search quality algorithm, maybe
Right,
like in
right.
but like it's very odd that it happened to multiple organizations in that short of a time frame, and so it's almost like a mafia, like you need protection for your business, and if you don't, you know, like get that
Oh, your
protection money.
customers are all dying.
Yeah, it's like all of a sudden your traffic plummets by 95% down to a trickle. So it's
Yeah.
like it clearly needs to have this more open platform that we're now working on at U.com, and we're letting companies kind of participate, and then really giving users the control through the voting to see what they actually find helpful.
Well, this has been fascinating. We are unfortunately out of time. I want to respect your time. I could talk to you about Google horror stories all day. I find them so interesting. And I know that there's a lot of ongoing investigation by the DOJ specifically in this antitrust space. So I guess my final question for you is just, how are you participating in that? And what is your thought on what they're pursuing, what the DOJ is pursuing as far as their strategy?
I think it's helpful. I think it's important, you know, similar to oil and like potentially rising oil prices and, you know, sort of collusion there. I think it's better for end users ultimately to have some competition. We're seeing a little bit of that competition now. I think these kinds of things will provide tailwinds. I've been interviewed by some of these efforts already also, and share my viewpoints and our experiences, and yeah, but of course, as a startup founder, you can't really wait for the government to like.
No, you have to move on your own. You got to figure out how to work around it.
That's right.
Yeah.
So we got to do what we got to do.
Well, thank you so much for joining us. You are now an honorary member of Fire is a very family-focused company. So you're now an honorary member of the Anderson family and the SNS tribe. So I'll be sending you a free membership. But please let us know if there's anything we can do to support you on your entrepreneurial journey. And we really appreciate your time. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Berit. Boom.